I've been thinking about something that's bothered me for a long time. I'm sitting here in Seattle in the same office I've had for decades, looking out at the rain pattering against the window, and I keep seeing this pattern. Smart people, really smart people with fancy degrees, struggling financially. And it doesn't make sense at first. I mean, these are folks who went to good schools. They got their MBAs, their law degrees, their engineering credentials. They can solve complex problems. They can analyze data. They can do things I could never do without a team behind me. But when it comes to money, they're broke or worse. They're drowning in debt. And I've asked myself over the years, why does education, which is supposed to be the path to prosperity, sometimes lead people in the opposite direction? I've spent my life around brilliant minds, from my days at Harvard, where I dropped out after just a couple of years, to building Microsoft with some of the sharpest engineers on the planet. Yet I've watched too many of them hit a wall when it comes to building real wealth. It's not about intelligence. It's about what we're not teaching in those classrooms. Back when I was a kid in Seattle, growing up in an upper middle class family, I was tinkering with computers at Lakeside School. 13, I wrote my first software program, tic-tac-toe game that let people play against the computer. That sparked something in me. But even then, I saw how education focused on grades and jobs, not on turning ideas into wealth. See, I love education. I really do. I read 5-6 hours a day. I'm always learning. I believe in knowledge. I believe in constantly improving your mind. But there's a difference between being educated and being financially intelligent. And that's what most people don't understand. You can have a PhD and still make terrible decisions with money. I've seen it happen countless times. Heck, I've made my own share of financial missteps early on, like overinvesting in certain tech ventures that didn't pan out, or realizing too late how big the internet was going to be in the mid-90 seconds. We were playing catch up at Microsoft because I underestimated it at first, but I learned from them. So today, I want to talk about the 10 major reasons why educated people stay poor. Not because they're stupid, far from it, but because they were taught the wrong things, or maybe they weren't taught the right things at all. And let me tell you, this isn't just theory. I've drawn from my own experiences, from watching friends and colleagues, and from the work we've done at the Gates Foundation, where we've seen how education intersects with poverty around the world. We've invested billions in improving education globally. But even there, I've noticed the gap between book smarts and financial smarts. The first reason, and this is a big one, educated people are taught to work for money instead of making money work for them. Let me explain what I mean. When you go through the education system, elementary school, high school, college, what are you being prepared for? You're being prepared to get a job. That's the whole point, right? Study hard, get good grades, get a good job. And, there's nothing wrong with having a job. I'm not saying that. I started Microsoft in a garage in 1975 with Paul Allen. But it grew because I wasn't just working a job. I was building something that generated income beyond my hours. But the problem is that's where the education stops. Nobody teaches you what to do with the money you earn from that job. Nobody teaches you about investing, about assets, about making your money multiply while you sleep. So what happens, these educated people get good jobs. They start making $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 a year, and they think, great, I've made it. But they haven't made it. They've just gotten themselves a nice prison cell because now they're trading time for money. And time is the one thing you can never get back. You see what I mean? If you're working 40, 50, 60 hours a week for your paycheck, you're not building wealth. You're just surviving. Maybe surviving comfortably, but still just surviving. Real wealth, the kind that gives you freedom, comes from owning things that produce income. Businesses, stocks, real estate, assets that work for you even when you're not working. I learned this when I was young. I wasn't the smartest kid in school, not by a long shot. But I understood that if I could own pieces of businesses, if I could invest in companies that made money, then my wealth would grow without me having to work every single hour of every single day. Back in the 70 seconds, when Paul and I were tinkering with software, we weren't just coding for fun. We were creating something that could scale. At 17, we even started a venture called Trafo Data to make traffic counters using an Intel processor. It didn't make us rich, but it taught me about turning ideas into revenue streams. Most educated people never learn this. They spend their whole lives working for money, and they never make the transition to having money work for them. And that's reason number one. They stay poor. Think about it. In our foundation's work fighting poverty, we've seen how microfinance and small investments can lift entire communities out of cycles of just surviving. Educated folks in the West could learn from that, start small, but start building assets. I've often said, save like a pessimist, but invest like an optimist. That's how you build resilience. The second reason, and this one's painful to watch, is lifestyle inflation. Educated people tend to spend money to show they're educated. You know what I mean? They get that degree, they get that good job, and suddenly they feel like they need to look the part. The nice car, the big house, the expensive clothes, all the trappings of success. I call it the keeping up with the Joneses problem, except now it's keeping up with your classmates from business school. You see someone from your MBA program driving a BMW and you think, well, I went to the same school, I should have one too. And before you know it, you're spending every dollar you make, or worse, you're spending dollars you haven't even made yet. Credit cards, car loans, that big mortgage. You're drowning in debt, but you look successful. I've never understood this. I really haven't. I still live modestly compared to what I could afford. I drive a car that's, I don't know, 10 years old, maybe older. And people think I'm crazy. They say, Bill, you're one of the richest people in the world. Why don't you live like it? But that's exactly why I'm one of the richest people in the world, because I don't waste money trying to impress people. Every dollar I don't spend on a fancy car or unnecessary luxuries is a dollar I can invest. And that dollar becomes $2, then $4, then $8. See, wealth is what you don't see. It's not the car in the driveway or the watch on your wrist. It's the investments in your portfolio. It's the businesses you own. It's the assets that are quietly growing year after year. But educated people, they get trapped in this lifestyle inflation cycle. They make more, they spend more, they never get ahead, and that's reason number two. I've said before that the belief the world is getting worse harms our ability to solve problems like poverty. Well, the same goes for personal finance. If you believe success is about appearances, you're harming your own future. In our foundation's efforts, we've seen how empowering women economically in poor countries starts with simple savings habits. Educated professionals could apply that, save first, spend what's left. The third reason educated people stay poor is they're afraid of failure, too afraid to take smart risks. Here's the thing about education. The system teaches you that failure is bad. You fail a test, you get a bad grade, you fail a class, you might not graduate. Failure is something to avoid at all costs. So by the time people finish their education, they're terrified of making mistakes, and that fear paralyzes them financially. They won't invest in the stock market because they're afraid of losing money. They won't start a business because they're afraid it might fail. They won't take any chances because they've been conditioned to play it safe. But here's what they don't understand. Wealth requires risk. Not reckless risk, mind you, not gambling, but calculated, intelligent risk. I've made mistakes, plenty of them. I started an early venture called Trafo Data that didn't work out as planned. It was supposed to process traffic data, but the market wasn't ready. I've admitted that many times. It was a mistake. But you know what? I learned from it. And that mistake taught me lessons that made me billions of dollars later with Microsoft. We pivoted, we iterated, and we succeeded because we weren't paralyzed. The difference between me and a lot of educated people is that I wasn't afraid to fail. I was afraid of not trying. I was afraid of missing opportunities because I was too scared to take a chance. I've always said success is a lousy teacher. It seduces smart people into thinking they can't lose. If your incentive is to never fail, you'll never succeed either, because success requires risk. So that's reason number 3. Educated people are so afraid of failure that they never take the risks necessary to build real wealth. And look, in my work with global health, we've taken risks on vaccines that might not work, but when they do, they save millions of lives. Financial risks, when smart, can change your life too. Don't let fear from school hold you back. Embrace learning from setbacks. The 4th reason, and this is interesting, is that educated people often have too much confidence in their credentials and not enough in their common sense. Let me tell you a story. Years ago, I was at some event, some conference or something, and I met this guy, really smart guy, had an MBA from one of the best schools, Harvard or Wharton, I can't remember. And he was telling me about this complicated investment strategy he had. It involved options and derivatives and all kinds of sophisticated financial instruments. And he's explaining it to me, and I'm listening. And finally I said, but do you understand what you own? Like, what does this company actually do? And he looked at me like I was an idiot. He said, Bill, this isn't about what the company does. It's about the mathematical models. It's about the algorithms. And I thought, well, this guy's going to lose all his money. And you know what? A few years later, I heard he did, because he was so smart, he forgot to use common sense. See, education can give you confidence, sometimes too much confidence. You start thinking that because you have a degree, because you understand complex theories, you must be right about everything, including money. But money doesn't care about your degree. Money doesn't care if you went to Harvard or if you dropped out of high school. Money only cares about one thing. Are you making smart decisions? I've always believed in keeping things simple. If I don't understand an investment, I don't make it. Doesn't matter how many smart people are doing it. Doesn't matter how sophisticated it sounds. But educated people, they sometimes get caught up in complexity. They think complex must be better than simple, and they make investments they don't really understand because other smart people are doing it, and that's how they lose money. That's reason number 4. I've talked about how college costs are skyrocketing, making people overconfident in debt-laden degrees without practical sense. Use your education, but ground it in reality. Ask basic questions like, does this make sense? The 5th reason is that educated people tend to focus on income instead of net worth. This is subtle, but it's important. When you're educated, when you have a good job, you think about your salary. I make $100,000 a year, or I make $200,000 a year. That's how you measure success. But wealthy people don't think about income. They think about net worth. They think about what they own, not what they earn. Let me give you an example. You could have a doctor making $300,000 a year. Sounds rich, right? But if that doctor is spending $290,000 a year on lifestyle, the big house, the private schools, the fancy vacations, they're only saving $10,000 a year. Compare that to a teacher making $50,000 a year who lives on $30,000 and invests the other $20,000. After 10 years, that teacher might actually have more net worth than the doctor because the teacher is building assets while the doctor is just maintaining a lifestyle. See, income is what you make. Net worth is what you keep. And most educated people, they get so focused on climbing the income ladder that they forget to build their net worth. They think, once I make more money, then I'll start investing, then I'll start saving. But that day never comes, because the more you make, the more you spend, unless you're intentional about it. I've always cared more about my net worth than my income. In fact, I've kept my salary at Microsoft pretty low for years because I don't need income. I need assets. I need ownership in businesses that are going to grow over time. That's how you build real wealth. But most educated people never make that mental shift. They chase income their whole lives and wonder why they never get wealthy. That's reason number 5. And tying into what I've said about financial success, start early and stay focused on building that net worth. It's not about the paycheck, it's about what you do with it. The 6th reason, and I see this all the time, educated people wait for permission to get started with investing. You know what I mean? They think they need to know everything before they can begin. They think they need to read 50 books, take 10 courses, get some certification. They think they need an expert to tell them it's okay to start. And look, I love learning. I'm all for education. But at some point, you've got to stop preparing and start doing. You've got to get in the game. I started my first business when I was young, in my teens. I didn't know everything. I didn't even know very much, but I knew enough. I knew that businesses make money, and if you own part of a business, you get part of that money. That was enough to get started. At 19, I left Harvard to pursue Microsoft because I saw the potential in personal computers. I didn't wait for a degree to validate me. Most educated people, they're the opposite. They wait until they feel completely ready. And you know what? You're never completely ready. There's always more to learn, always another book to read, another course to take. Meanwhile, the people who started early, even if they didn't know everything, they're years ahead because they're learning by doing. They're making mistakes, sure, but they're also building wealth. I always tell young people, start with what you have. If you only have $100, invest that $100. If you only understand one type of investment, start there. You'll learn more from actually investing than you ever will from just reading about it. But educated people, they analysis paralysis themselves. They wait for the perfect moment, the perfect knowledge, the perfect opportunity. And while they're waiting, years go by, decades sometimes, and that's reason number 6. They wait for permission that's never coming. The 7th reason educated people stay poor is they believe the myth that their job is secure. This one's interesting because educated people spend all this time and money getting degrees specifically so they can have job security. That's part of the promise, right? Get educated, get a good job, have a stable career. But job security is an illusion. It always has been. Companies downsize, industries change, technology makes jobs obsolete. I've seen it happen over and over again throughout my life, from the dot-com bust to AI disruptions today. At Microsoft, we had to adapt constantly or risk becoming irrelevant. Yet educated people put all their financial eggs in one basket, their job. They don't build other income streams. They don't invest in assets that could support them if they lost their job. They just assume their paycheck will keep coming forever. And when it doesn't, they're devastated, not just emotionally, but financially, because they never prepared for that possibility. I've always believed in diversification, not just in your investment portfolio, but in your income sources. You want money coming in from different places. Your job, sure, but also investments, dividends, rental income, side businesses, whatever you can build, because the moment you rely completely on one source of income, especially a job that someone else controls, you're vulnerable. You're at the mercy of forces you can't control. Most educated people don't see it that way. They think, I went to a good school, I have a professional degree, my job is safe, and then one day it's not. And they're lost. That's reason number 7, the false belief in job security. The 8th reason, and this is a big one, educated people pay too much for bad advice. Here's what happens. You're educated, you're making good money, and you think, I should probably do something smart with this money. I should get a financial advisor. So you go to one of these big firms, Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley, whatever, and you sit down with an advisor, and this advisor, they're wearing a nice suit, they have a fancy office, they talk a good game, and you think, great, this person's going to help me get rich. But here's what you don't realize. Most financial advisors are salespeople. They're not there to make you rich. They're there to make themselves rich by selling you products that pay them commissions. They'll put you in actively managed mutual funds with high fees. They'll sell you whole life insurance policies you don't need. They'll churn your account buying and selling constantly to generate fees. And you don't even realize it's happening because you trusted them. You thought they had your best interests at heart. I've railed against this for years. The financial industry is full of people who extract value instead of creating it. They take a percentage of your wealth every single year, whether they help you or hurt you. And educated people fall for it because they think, well, these are professionals. They must know better than me. But they don't. Most of them don't even beat the market. You'd be better off putting your money in a simple index fund and forgetting about it. That's what I tell people all the time. Just buy an S&P 500 index fund. Keep your costs low. Be patient. That's it. That's the whole strategy. And it works better than what 90% of financial advisors will do for you. But educated people, they think they need complicated strategies and expert advice, and they pay through the nose for it. And after decades of fees, they're significantly poorer than they should be. That's reason number 8, paying too much for bad advice. The 9th reason educated people stay poor is that they don't understand the power of compound interest, or they understand it intellectually but not emotionally. Every educated person has heard of compound interest. Einstein supposedly called it the 8th wonder of the world. The idea that your money grows and then the growth grows and then the growth on the growth grows. It's simple math, but understanding it in theory is different from feeling it in your bones. Most educated people, they know compound interest exists, but they don't really believe it will work for them, or they don't have the patience to let it work. Here's what I mean. Compound interest requires time, lots of time. You invest money today, and in 5 years, you might have a nice little gain, maybe 30, 40% if you're lucky. But in 30 years, that same investment could be worth 10 times what you put in or more. But most educated people, in their 20 seconds and 30 seconds, they think 30 years is too long. I need money now. I need results now. So they either don't invest at all, or they invest for a little while, get impatient, and pull out. They don't give compound interest time to work its magic. They don't let that snowball roll down the hill and get bigger and bigger. They pick it up after a few feet and wonder why it's not huge yet. I've been investing for over 50 years now, and the majority of my wealth, the vast majority, was created after I turned 50, not because I got smarter, but because compound interest finally had enough time to really kick in. That's the secret nobody tells you. Wealth isn't built in your 20 seconds or 30 seconds or even 40 seconds. That's when you're planting the seeds. The real growth happens later in your 50 seconds and 60 seconds and beyond, but only if you planted those seeds early and didn't dig them up. Most educated people don't have that patience. They want to see massive results immediately. And when they don't, they give up. They sell their investments, they stop saving, they chase some other strategy. And that's reason number 9, impatience, not giving compound interest the time it needs to work. The 10th reason, and this might be the most important one, is that educated people are taught what to think, not how to think. Let me explain. The education system is designed to give you information, facts, formulas, theories. Here's how you solve this type of problem. Here's the right answer to this question. It's all about absorbing knowledge that someone else decided was important. But thinking for yourself, questioning assumptions, coming up with original ideas, that's not really taught. In fact, it's often discouraged because in school there's a right answer and a wrong answer. And your job is to learn the right answer, not to challenge whether the question itself makes sense. So people come out of this system and they're really good at following instructions. They're really good at solving problems that someone else defined. But when it comes to their own financial life, when there's no textbook, no professor, no clear right answer, they're lost. They don't know how to think independently about money. They don't know how to evaluate whether something makes sense for their unique situation. So they default to doing what everyone else does. They follow the crowd, and the crowd is usually wrong, especially when it comes to money. I've spent my whole life thinking independently. Sometimes it's made me look foolish. Back in the late 90 seconds, everyone was buying .com stocks. Tech stocks were going to the moon. And I said, I don't understand all these businesses. I'm not buying everything. And people laughed at me. They said I was out of touch. But I knew something they didn't. I knew that just because everyone's doing something doesn't mean it's smart. In fact, it often means the opposite. 2 years later, the dot-com bubble burst. All those companies collapsed. All those people who were so sure they were right, they lost everything. And the people who thought independently, who didn't follow the crowd, we survived, we thrived. But most educated people never learn this skill. They're taught to conform, not to question. They're taught to follow the path, not to create their own. And financially, that's deadly because the path most people follow, get a job, spend everything you make, retire on Social Security, that path leads to poverty or at best scraping by. If you want real wealth, you have to think differently. You have to question assumptions. You have to be willing to go against the crowd. And that's reason number 10. The most fundamental reason educated people stay poor is that they never learned how to think for themselves. You know, as I sit here thinking about all these reasons, I realize they all connect to the same basic problem. Education teaches you how to work in the system. It doesn't teach you how to build wealth outside the system. And that's not really education's fault. Schools are designed to produce employees, not entrepreneurs or investors. They're designed to create people who can follow instructions, meet deadlines, and solve predefined problems. That's valuable. That's necessary for society to function, but it's not enough. Not if you want financial freedom, not if you want to build generational wealth. For that, you need a different kind of education, one that most schools don't provide. You need to learn about money, about investing, about assets and liabilities, about the difference between working for money and having money work for you, about patience and discipline and thinking independently. And as I've often said, if you're born poor, it's not your mistake, but if you die poor, it's your mistake. The good news is it's never too late to learn these things and invest in your human capital to escape poverty. I don't care if you're 30 or 40 or 50. I don't care if you've made every mistake I've talked about today. You can start changing your approach right now. Start small. Take 10% of your income and invest it in index funds, in dividend stocks, in whatever you understand. Just start. Don't wait until you know everything. Don't wait till you have more money. Start with what you have right now. Stop trying to impress people with your lifestyle. Drive a car that's a little older. Live in a house that's a little smaller. Take that money you would have spent on impressing people and invest it instead. I promise you in 20 years you'll be grateful you did. Take smart risks. Start a side business. Invest in the stock market. Do something that might fail but might also succeed wildly. Because the biggest risk isn't losing some money. The biggest risk is getting to the end of your life and realizing you never even tried. Learn to think for yourself. Don't just do what everyone else is doing. Don't just follow the conventional wisdom. Ask yourself, does this make sense for me, for my goals, for my situation, and have the courage to go your own way if the answer is no. Most importantly, understand that education is just the beginning. What you learned in school prepared you for a job. What you learn from here on out will determine whether you build wealth. And that education, the financial education, that's something you have to take responsibility for yourself, because no one else is going to do it for you. I'm 70 years old now. I've seen a lot in my life. I've seen educated people waste their potential and uneducated people build empires. And the difference is never intelligence. It's never how many degrees you have or where you went to school. The difference is always the same things: patience, discipline, independent thinking, the willingness to delay gratification, the courage to be different. Those qualities, those are what determine who builds wealth and who doesn't. And the beautiful thing is you can develop them starting today. So if you're educated and you're struggling financially, don't despair. You're not doomed. You just need to unlearn some things you were taught and learn some things you weren't. You need to realize that your degree got you in the door, but it won't make you wealthy. Only you can do that through smart decisions repeated consistently over a long period of time. It's not complicated. It's not easy, but it's not complicated. Save more than you spend. Invest the difference. Give it time to grow. Think for yourself. Don't follow the crowd. Do those things, and 20, 30 years from now, you'll be wealthy. Not because you're educated, but because you were smart enough to learn what your education didn't teach you. And remember, as I've committed to giving away virtually all my wealth to fight poverty and disease through the Gates Foundation over the next 20 years, true success isn't just about accumulating, it's about using it to make a difference. But first, secure your own foundation. Thank you for listening to me ramble. I hope some of this has been helpful. I hope you'll take it to heart and make some changes, because you can do this. You really can. You just have to decide that financial freedom is more important than looking successful. That building wealth is more important than following the crowd. If you're watching this video, make that decision today. Start investing now and share this with someone who needs it. Your future self will thank you. Good luck.